Ever wonder what your spouse is really up to while you're glued to the evening news? I found out the hard way at 63 years old that my quiet, church-going wife of 41 years was running an online adult channel from our suburban home. And not just any amateur operation. We're talking about a subscription service with over 15,000 paying members, each forking over $19.99 monthly to watch Margaret, or Maggie Midnight as her fans knew her, perform acts I hadn't even considered possible at our age. The kicker? She'd been doing it for 7 years. 7 years of book club meetings and late-night yoga sessions. 7 years of me dozing off in my recliner while 20 feet away, my wife was becoming an internet sensation for the over 50 crowd. The day I discovered Margaret's secret business wasn't particularly special. Tuesday, April 16th. I remember, because it was tax day, and I'd taken the morning off to finish our returns. Margaret had left for what she called her senior wellness group, a weekly gathering I'd never questioned. Why would I? After 4 decades together, trust isn't something you think about. It's just there, like the foundation of our colonial-style house in Massachusetts. I was hunting for a receipt in Margaret's desk drawer, the one place she kept meticulously organized, while the rest of the house reflected our comfortable disregard for perfect order. That's when I found it. A small notebook with usernames, passwords, and monthly revenue figures that made my pension look like pocket change. At first, I thought she might be running some innocent online business. Margaret had always been crafty. Her quilts won ribbons at the county fair. Maybe she'd finally started selling them online. But why keep it secret? The password to her laptop was right there in the notebook. Silver Fox 1960. Not particularly creative, but then again, Margaret had always used simple passwords. I'd often teased her about it over the years. What I found after logging in wasn't quilts. The browser history led me to a website called Silver Seductions, featuring a sultry banner photo of a woman in elegant lingerie, face partially obscured, but unmistakably my Margaret. Her auburn hair, now elegantly streaked with gray, cascaded over shoulders I'd massaged countless times. The body I'd known for decades through pregnancy, middle age, and now our senior years was displayed for thousands of strangers, posed in ways she'd never once suggested in our bedroom. My hands trembled as I clicked through the site. There she was, my Margaret, in our bedroom, our bathroom, even in the sunroom where we had Sunday coffee. Videos upon videos, galleries of photos, all meticulously categorized. Maggie's solo Sundays, teachers after hours, kitchen confidential. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The woman smiling seductively at the camera, whispering things I'd never heard her say, wasn't the Margaret who reminded me to take my blood pressure medication or who complained about the neighbor's dog. This was someone else entirely. Confident, adventurous, uninhibited. The comment section was worse. Men and women alike. Yes, women too. Praising her creativity, her openness, her authentic sexuality. One user named GreyWolf75 wrote, "Maggie, your Thursday show was transcendent. My wife and I have rekindled our intimacy thanks to you." Rekindled. The word burned in my mind. When was the last time Margaret and I had kindled anything besides the occasional fire in our hearth during winter? I checked the broadcast schedule. She was live every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 1 p.m., while I was at my part-time consulting job, with a special midnight show on Saturdays. I'd been in the house during some of those Saturday performances, likely snoring away upstairs while she entertained her audience downstairs. The payment portal showed earnings of $297,186 last year alone. She was making more than I ever had as an engineering manager even during my peak earning years. I sat there for hours clicking through her digital life, this persona she'd created and nurtured while I remained oblivious. By the time I heard her car pull into the driveway, I'd gone through every emotion imaginable: shock, betrayal, anger, humiliation, and strangely, a twinge of pride. At 62, my wife was a goddamn internet sensation. I closed the laptop but left it on her desk, open evidence of my discovery. Then I positioned myself in the living room pretending to review tax forms while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm home," Margaret called out, her voice carrying the same cheerful tone it always had. How had I never detected any difference? The group ran late today. Meredith brought those almond cookies you like. I heard her hanging up her coat, placing her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, our routine for 4 decades. Her footsteps moved toward the kitchen, then suddenly stopped. She must have noticed the light in her office. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, her footsteps approached the living room. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face drained of color. Her eyes, the same hazel eyes I'd looked into on our wedding day, were wide with recognition. She knew exactly what I'd found. "Richard," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my tone. "I think Maggie Midnight should do the talking now. Apparently she has a lot to say to strangers. Let's see what she has to say to her husband." Margaret sank into the armchair across from me, her hands, still elegant at 62, trembling slightly as she placed her purse beside her. For a woman who performed for thousands, she suddenly seemed small. "How much have you seen?" she asked finally. "Enough to know that our marriage has been a lie. Enough to know that while I thought we were growing old together, content in our quiet life, you've been—" I couldn't even find the right words. "Who are you? Because you're certainly not the woman I married." Margaret's eyes flashed. Not with shame, but with something unexpected. Defiance. "Maybe that's the problem, Richard. I'm not the 21-year-old girl you married. I haven't been for a long time. So this is my fault? I made you take off your clothes for strangers?" "They're not strangers to me," she said quietly. "Many of them have been with me for years. They talk to me. They share their lives, their insecurities, their desires. And what do you share with them that you couldn't share with me?" "Everything you never wanted to hear." Her words hit me like a slap. What did that mean? We talked. We shared meals, a bed, a life. Didn't we? "We've been married for 41 years, I said. "You could have told me anything." Margaret laughed, but it wasn't her usual warm chuckle. This was bitter, laden with something I couldn't quite identify. "Richard, when was the last time we really talked? Not about bills or the grandkids or what to have for dinner. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted, what I dreamed about, what made me feel alive?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. The truth was, I couldn't remember. Our conversations had become functional, practical. Somewhere, along the way, we'd stopped being curious about each other. That doesn't justify lying to me for 7 years. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't, but it explains why I didn't think you'd understand." "Understand what? That my wife needed to expose herself to thousands of people? That your wife needed to be seen?" Her voice rose, startling both of us. "Do you have any idea what it's like to become invisible? To walk into a room and have everyone look through you because you're just another old woman?" I stared at her, bewildered. Margaret had always been beautiful to me. Different than in her youth, certainly, but still Margaret. Online, I'm not just someone's grandmother or someone's wife. I'm me, Margaret. I talk about books and politics. I share my thoughts on aging and, yes, on sexuality too. These people value what I have to say. And they pay to see you naked. Some do. Others subscribe for the conversation. You'd be surprised how many people just want someone to acknowledge that life doesn't end at 60. I was having trouble reconciling this articulate, passionate woman with the wife who discussed grocery lists and grandchildren's soccer games with me. Had she always had these thoughts? These needs? How did it start? I asked, genuinely curious despite my anger. Margaret sighed, tension visibly leaving her shoulders at my less accusatory tone. "Remember when Jenny set up that Facebook account? For me? To share photos of the grandkids?" I nodded. Our daughter had insisted we join social media about 8 years ago. I joined some groups for women my age, book clubs, gardening forums. Then I found this group called Second Act Seniors. It was about rediscovering yourself after retirement. She paused, gauging my reaction. I gestured for her to continue. There was this woman, Martha from Arizona, 70 years old and running, a blog about senior sexuality. She was so unapologetic, so comfortable in her skin. I started following her content and then others like it. Margaret stood and walked to the window, looking out at our carefully maintained garden. One day, Martha posted about how liberating it had been to start her blog, how it had saved her marriage. Her husband even helped her with it. I thought, maybe that could be us. I felt a stab of guilt. You never asked. She turned to face me. I tried, Richard. 3 years before I started the channel. Remember that night in Napa for our anniversary? I brought up an article about senior couples exploring new forms of intimacy. I did remember. Vaguely. I'd made some joke about not needing gimmicks, that we were doing just fine. You dismissed it, like you dismissed every suggestion that deviated from our routine. So eventually I stopped suggesting. The realization was uncomfortable. Had I really been so closed off? So instead of trying again, you created a whole secret life. It wasn't supposed to become this big, she said, returning to her seat. It started as just a blog, text only, sharing thoughts about aging gracefully, staying vibrant. Then I added a few tasteful photos. Tasteful? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, tasteful, she retorted. Artistic. Nothing you wouldn't see in a fine arts photography book. And then people started responding. Women my age saying I'd help them feel beautiful again. Men saying I'd help them appreciate their wives in new ways. Her eyes lit up with genuine pride. I was making a difference, Richard. And the money? Was that also about making a difference? A flush crept up her neck. It wasn't about money initially, but when it started coming in, it felt good, contributing again, not just spending your retirement fund. That stung. Margaret had been a teacher, before retiring early to help with our grandchildren. She'd never complained about the financial arrangement. Where is it? The money. In a separate account. I've been investing most of it. For us, she added pointedly. For us? I laughed bitterly. You've been lying to me for 7 years, and the money is for us? Yes, for us. For emergencies, for the grandkids' college funds. I'm not the villain. You're making me out to be, Richard. I stood up abruptly. This conversation was going nowhere. My wife, my partner of 4 decades, had been living a double life, and somehow, she was making me feel like I was the one who'd failed her. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys. Richard, please, we need to talk this through. I think you've done enough talking, I said coldly. To thousands of strangers. Maybe now it's my turn to do something unexpected. I drove aimlessly, for hours, eventually finding myself at a bar I'd never entered before despite passing it countless times. The Blue Moon Lounge had always seemed like a place for younger people. But tonight I didn't care. I needed a drink and anonymity. The bartender, a woman maybe in her 40s with short gray hair and impressive tattoo sleeves, didn't bat an eye as I settled onto a stool. Rough night? She asked, sliding a cocktail napkin in front of me. You could say that, I replied, ordering a Scotch neat. Let me guess, she said, pouring my drink. Either work drama or relationship drama. Nothing else puts that particular look on someone's face. Relationship. 41 years worth? She whistled, low. That's impressive. My longest was 8, and I thought that was an eternity. It was an eternity of lies, apparently. The words slipped out before I could stop them. She nodded sagely. Ah, the discovery phase. Always the worst. She extended her hand. I'm Viv. Richard. Well, Richard, whatever you found out today doesn't erase 41 years. Remember that while you're processing. She moved away to serve another customer, leaving me with that thought and my scotch. I nursed my drink, scrolling through my phone aimlessly, when a notification popped up. A text from my old college roommate, Frank. Dude, isn't this Margaret? When did she become an internet star? Attached was a screenshot of Maggie Midnight from some forum dedicated to senior content creators. The post was celebrating her account reaching 1 million total views. My stomach dropped. Frank. Who else knew? Did our children know? Our neighbors? Had I been the oblivious joke of our social circle all this time? I ordered another scotch and texted back, "Just discovered this myself. Don't want to discuss." Frank's reply was immediate. "Sorry, man. Thought you knew." She's actually really respected in those communities, not just for the obvious. That didn't help. I put my phone away and focused on my drink. The idea that Margaret, my Margaret, had built a reputation, a community, an entire business without my knowledge was overwhelming. I'd spent my career building systems, managing projects, tracking every detail. How had I missed something so significant in my own home? By my third scotch, a dangerous plan was forming. If Margaret could have a secret digital life, why couldn't I? I pulled out my phone again and downloaded the app for Silver Seductions. The irony of paying for my own wife's content wasn't lost on me, but I needed to see exactly what she was offering the world. The membership process was surprisingly thorough. Age verification, payment details, even a brief questionnaire about what I was looking for. I created a username that Margaret wouldn't recognize. Engineer Exploring. Once inside, I was immediately overwhelmed. Margaret's channel was just one of dozens featuring seniors exploring their sexuality. But hers was prominently featured as a top creator. I navigated to her profile and was confronted with a library of content organized by theme, date, and popularity. The most viewed video, with over 200,000 views, was titled, "Midnight Confessions: What We Don't Tell Our Husbands." My finger hovered over the play button. Did I really want to hear what Margaret hadn't told me? What she'd instead chosen to share with thousands of strangers? The video opened with Margaret, Maggie, sitting in a silky blue robe in what I recognized as our guest bedroom, transformed with strategic lighting and draped fabrics. She looked directly into the camera, confident and composed. "Welcome, Silver. Lovers." Today I want to talk about something intimate, not just physically intimate, but emotionally intimate. The things we keep from our longtime partners, not out of malice, but out of habit. She shifted, crossing her legs, the robe revealing just a hint of thigh. The Margaret I knew would never be so deliberately alluring. Or would she? Had I simply stopped noticing? "I've been married for 40 years to the same man," she continued. "He's kind, responsible, predictable. He thinks he knows everything about me, and therein lies the problem." My chest tightened. Predictable? Was that how she saw me? When you've been with someone for decades, they stop really seeing you. They see the version of you they've constructed, their wife, their life partner, the mother of their children. They don't see you struggling with your changing body, your evolving desires, your fear of becoming irrelevant. She leaned toward the camera, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Here's what my husband doesn't know. I still have desires, powerful ones. I still want to be looked at with hunger. I still want to be surprised. I still want to explore. But somewhere along the way, we settled into such comfortable patterns that asking for something new feels like rocking a very reliable boat." She stood, moving around the room with graceful purpose. "How many of you have fantasies you've never shared with your longtime partners? Things you think about when you're alone? Experiences you wish you could have but don't know how to ask for?" The comment section, visible in a sidebar, erupted with responses. Dozens of people sharing abbreviated versions of their secret desires. "That's why we're here," Margaret continued. "This is a safe space to acknowledge that age doesn't diminish desire. It transforms it. Here we can be honest about what we want, what we miss, what we dream about." She sat on the edge of the bed, the robe slipping slightly off one shoulder. "Today, I'm going to demonstrate something I've never asked my husband for, something I've only recently admitted to myself that I want." I closed the app abruptly, unable to watch anymore. The scotch churned in my stomach alongside a confusing mixture of emotions. Betrayal, yes, but also regret. How had I missed this side of Margaret? Had she tried to show me and I'd failed to? See? I paid my tab and called a rideshare, too unsteady and emotionally raw to drive. As the car navigated the familiar streets toward home, I wondered what awaited me there. Would Margaret be ready with more justifications? Would she be remorseful? Defiant, I hit play. The house was dark except for a single light in our bedroom window. I entered quietly, half expecting to find camera equipment or evidence of her digital career scattered about. But everything was as it always was. Neat, comfortable, familiar. Found Margaret sitting on our bed wearing simple cotton pajamas, her face freshly washed, looking like the woman I'd gone to sleep beside for 40 years. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd been crying. I was worried. She said simply, "I watched one of your videos," I replied, sitting heavily in the armchair across from the bed, maintaining distance physically and emotionally. She inhaled sharply. "Which one?" "Midnight Confessions. The one about what you don't tell me." Margaret closed her eyes briefly. "That was one of the first ones. Were you ever going to tell me? About any of it?" She looked at me directly, unblinking. "I tried, Richard. Not about the channel specifically, but about what I was feeling. You didn't want to hear it. So you told the world instead. I told people who wanted to listen." We sat in tense silence for a long moment. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from her parents, ticked steadily, marking the seconds of this strange new reality. "Show me," I said finally. "What?" "Show me how you do it. The channel, the videos, everything." Margaret stared at me, clearly trying to assess my motivation. Was this a trap? A test? Simple voyeurism? Why? Because I want to understand who my wife really is. Because apparently, I've been living with a stranger for years. Because I need to know what they have that I don't. She flinched at the bitterness in my tone, but nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she said. "I have a scheduled session at 1. You can watch me work, if that's really what you want." It is. I slept in the guest room that night, the same room where my wife had revealed intimate desires to strangers instead of to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Morning brought no clarity. Margaret and I moved around each other cautiously, maintaining the polite distance of strangers forced to share space. She made coffee. I toasted bagels. We ate in silence. At precisely noon, Margaret disappeared upstairs. I gave her the space, busying myself with mindless tasks until 12:45 when I could wait no longer. I found her in the guest bedroom, which had been transformed. Professional lighting stood in strategic positions. The bed was immaculately made, with silky burgundy sheets I'd never seen before. A laptop was positioned on a small desk, angled toward the bed. Various props, books, wine glasses, what appeared to be massage oils, were arranged artfully on the nightstand. And Margaret was different too. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical bun, now fell in soft waves around her face. She wore a silk-wrapped dress in deep emerald that complemented her eyes. Her makeup was subtle but effective, highlighting features that our comfortable married life had taught me to overlook. She was beautiful. Had she always been this beautiful? Had I forgotten how to see it? "This is your setup?" I asked, feeling oddly like an intruder. "Part of it. I have different settings for different types of content. The sunroom for morning reflections, the library for intellectual discussions, this room for more intimate topics." I noticed a small notebook on the desk, filled with what appeared to be content plans, schedules, topic ideas. This wasn't just some impulsive hobby. This was a meticulously managed business. "You've put a lot of thought into this." "I've had 7 years to refine it," she replied, adjusting one of the lights. "I have about 10 minutes before I go live. You can sit in that corner if you want to watch. But Richard," her voice grew serious, "if you choose to stay, you can't. Interrupt. This is my workplace. My workplace." The words emphasized just how separate this part of her life had been from our marriage. She had created an entire professional identity I knew nothing about. "I'll just observe," I promised, settling into an armchair partly hidden from the camera's view. Margaret nodded, then turned to her laptop, transforming before my eyes. Her posture straightened. A confident smile replaced her previously tense expression. She became Maggie. Hello, silver lovers. She greeted the camera warmly once the live indicator lit up. Welcome to Thursday Thoughts with Maggie Midnight. For those joining us for the first time, this is a space where we explore the multifaceted experience of aging with grace, honesty, and yes, a healthy dose of sensuality. Comments immediately began flooding the chat sidebar. Greetings, compliments, even a few virtual gifts that seemed to translate to real money. Margaret Maggie acknowledged several regular viewers by name, asking about their lives with what appeared to be genuine interest. Today, she continued, I want to talk about rediscovery. Not just of our bodies as they change, but of our partnerships. How do we see each other with fresh eyes after decades together? How do we break through the comfortable numbness of routine to really connect again? The topic hit uncomfortably close to home. Was this intentional? A message meant specifically for me under the guise of content for her followers? Many of you have been with your partners for 20, 30, even 50 years. That's beautiful. But it also comes with challenges. We fall into patterns. We stop surprising each other. We assume we know everything there is to know. She moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her dress riding up just slightly to reveal her crossed legs. The camera angle was flattering but not overtly sexual. This wasn't pornography, at least not what was happening now. This was something more complex. I received an email last week from a viewer, let's call her Eleanor, who's been married for 35 years. She wrote, Maggie, I love my husband deeply, but I feel invisible to him. How do I make him really see me again? Margaret looked directly into the camera, and though I knew she couldn't see me in my corner, it felt like she was speaking directly to me. Eleanor, the first thing to understand is that this feeling is almost universal in long-term relationships. But here's the truth. Your partner can't see what you don't show them. She stood up, moving gracefully around the room as she spoke. We talk a lot on this channel about physical intimacy, but today I want to focus on emotional exposure. When was the last time you made yourself vulnerable? When was the last time you shared a desire, a fantasy, a need that wasn't about household management or vacation planning? The chat exploded with comments. Margaret paused, reading a few aloud. It's too scary at this point. What if he laughs at me? We're too old to change our patterns now. She shook her head gently. Those aren't reasons, my friends. Those are excuses born from fear. She picked up one of the books from the nightstand, a leather-bound journal. I challenge each of you this week to write down one thing you've never told your partner. One desire, one fantasy, one need. You don't have to share it yet. Just acknowledge it to yourself first. She opened the journal, revealing handwritten pages. I'll go first. Here's something I wrote in my own journal last month. I wish he would look at me the way he did when we were young, not with the comfort of familiarity, but with the excitement of discovery. I wish he would touch me like he's mapping unknown territory, not navigating a well-traveled path. A lump formed in my throat. Had Margaret really written that about me? Did she still desire that kind of connection with me despite her online performances? Now, let's talk about practical steps to rediscovery, she continued, setting the journal aside. First, create an environment that breaks your routine. It could be as simple as rearranging your bedroom furniture, or as adventurous as booking an unexpected getaway. For the next 45 minutes, I watched as my wife of 41 years held court like a seasoned performer, dispensing relationship advice, answering questions about intimacy, and occasionally sharing personal anecdotes that walked the line between revealing and discreet. Some were about us, though she never identified me. Stories from our early marriage reframed through her current perspective. It was strange watching Margaret through this lens. She was the same woman who reminded me about doctor's appointments and bickered with me about thermostat settings, yet somehow completely different. Vibrant, wise, magnetic. The session concluded with Margaret thanking her viewers, promoting an upcoming special event, and signing off with her signature farewell. Remember, silver lovers, passion doesn't tarnish with age. It just develops a beautiful patina. Once the camera was off, she seemed to deflate slightly, the performance energy dissipating. She turned to me, her expression a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "So," she said simply, "that's what I do." I struggled to articulate the jumble of thoughts racing through my mind. "You're good at it." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Thank you. I've worked hard at it." "They really listen to you." "Yes, they do." The implication hung in the air between us. "Unlike you." Was that? I hesitated. Was that journal entry real? About wanting me to look at you differently? Margaret sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Yes, Richard. Everything I share comes from something real. I don't manufacture feelings for content. But you never said those things to me." "Didn't I?" she challenged. "Maybe not in those exact words, but I've been trying to tell you in 100 different ways that I need more, that we need more." I thought back over recent years. Margaret suggesting weekend getaways that I dismissed as impractical. Her buying new clothes that I barely noticed. Her attempt to reorganize our bedroom that I resisted because I liked things the way they were. "I didn't see it," I admitted. "I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me." "No," she agreed. "You didn't." Another uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with 41 years of accumulated misunderstandings and missed opportunities. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "Do you keep doing this?" I gestured to the setup around us. "That depends," she said carefully. "Are you asking me to stop?" The question caught me off guard. Was I? Did I have the right to demand she abandon something that clearly brought her fulfillment? Something she had built entirely on her own? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm still trying to process all of this. But I know I can't go back to the way things were, me oblivious, you living a double life." Margaret nodded slowly. "That's fair. I don't want to go back either. It's been exhausting, keeping this separate from you." "Then why did you?" "Fear," she admitted. "Fear that you wouldn't understand, that you'd be disgusted, that you'd make me choose between this new part of myself I've discovered and our marriage." The raw honesty in her voice struck me. How long had it been since we'd spoken to each other with such transparency? "Would you have chosen this over our marriage?" I needed to know. Margaret met my gaze steadily. "I shouldn't have had to choose, Richard. You're my husband. This is my work, my passion project, my community. In an ideal world, you would have been part of it from the beginning." "How? As what? Your cameraman?" The bitterness crept back into my voice. "As my partner," she replied simply. "As someone who celebrated my success instead of feeling threatened by it. As someone who might have been curious about this world instead of immediately judging it." Her words stung because they contained truth. I hadn't asked questions about her online community or the content she created. I'd immediately framed it as a betrayal rather than an achievement. "Show me more," I said suddenly. "What?" "Your channel, your content, the community you've built. I want to understand it." Margaret studied me, perhaps looking for signs of mockery or a trap. Finding none, she nodded and motioned for me to join her at the laptop. For the next 2 hours, Margaret guided me through her digital world. She showed me her content library, some videos explicitly sensual, others thoughtfully educational, many somewhere in between. She introduced me to the community forums where seniors discussed everything from health concerns to relationship dynamics to sexual techniques appropriate for aging bodies. I saw Margaret through her followers' eyes, as Maggie Midnight, wise guide through the complexities of senior sexuality, advocate for continued sensuality in the later decades of life, and yes, object of admiration and desire. Most surprisingly, I learned about the impact she'd had. There were messages from couples who had rekindled their intimacy after decades of dormancy, from widows and widowers who had found comfort in her affirmation that desire doesn't die with age, from people struggling with body image who found her confidence inspiring. "I had no idea," I said finally, sitting back in my chair. The scope of this, what you've built, it's become more than I ever imagined, she admitted. What started as an experiment in being seen has become a mission. These people, especially women my age, have been told by society that they're past their expiration date, that sensuality and desire belong to the young. I'm showing them that's not true. I looked at my wife, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. The fine lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of laughter, the capable hands that had raised our children, maintained our home, and apparently built an online empire. The intelligence behind her eyes that I'd somehow started taking for granted. I'm sorry, I said, the words inadequate but necessary. I'm sorry I stopped seeing you. Margaret's expression softened. And I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to make you see. That I built this whole separate life instead of insisting we grow together. Where do we go from here? She reached across the space between us, taking my hand. That's up to us, isn't it? We can continue as we were, living parallel lives under the same roof. We can separate, each pursuing independent paths, or... A spark of mischief lit her eyes, the same spark I'd fallen in love with 41 years ago. Or you could join me. Join you? In what way? In any way you're comfortable with. Behind the scenes, helping with the business aspects, or... She hesitated, gauging my reaction. Eventually, maybe on camera. There's a growing audience for couples our age navigating this territory together. The suggestion was so far outside my comfort zone that my initial instinct was immediate rejection. But something stopped me. The realization that my comfort zone, our comfortable, predictable life, had nearly cost me my marriage, had caused Margaret to seek fulfillment elsewhere. I don't know if I can do that, I said honestly. But I'm willing to learn about this world you've created, to understand it, to support you in it somehow. Relief flooded her features. That's all I'm asking for right now. Openness, willingness, curiosity. I nodded, still holding her hand. I have a lot of questions, and probably some more anger and hurt to work through. I know, that's fair. But I want to try, to see you, really see you, again. Margaret smiled, not Maggie Midnight's practiced, seductive smile, but Margaret, Cooper's genuine one, with the slight crookedness on the left side that had always charmed me. That's a start, she said, a new start for us. The next few weeks were a strange balancing act. By day, we were Richard and Margaret Cooper, semi-retired suburban couple dealing with the aftershocks of a significant marital revelation. By afternoon, 3 times a week, Margaret transformed into Maggie Midnight, and I became a silent observer to this other facet of my wife's life. I kept my promise to learn about her digital world. I watched her sessions from my corner, noting how she prepared, how she engaged with her audience, how she maintained boundaries while still creating an atmosphere of intimacy. It was, I had to admit, impressive, both as a business operation and as a performance art. The anger didn't disappear overnight. Sometimes watching her interact so comfortably with her online community, I'd feel a fresh wave of betrayal. Why had she shared these parts of herself with strangers before bringing them to me? But increasingly, those moments were outnumbered by bursts of unexpected pride. My wife had built something meaningful, something that helped people, something entirely her own. It was during the 3rd week of my apprenticeship, as Margaret jokingly called it, that I first participated, albeit minimally. She was discussing the importance of touch in long-term relationships when a commenter asked if she could demonstrate what she meant. Actually, Margaret said, glancing toward my corner with a question in her eyes, I might have some help with this one. I hesitated, then nodded slightly. She extended her hand, inviting me into the frame. The chat erupted with excitement as I awkwardly settled beside her on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain a respectful distance from the camera. This is my husband, Margaret said simply, the word husband carrying a weight it hadn't possessed in years. He's kindly agreed to assist with today's demonstration. The next 15 minutes were surreal. Under Margaret's gentle guidance, we demonstrated different forms of non-sexual touch that couples often neglect with time. the importance of hand-holding, the intimacy of tracing your partner's facial features, the comfort of synchronized breathing, while embracing. Nothing explicit, nothing I would have been embarrassed for our children to witness, yet somehow more intimate than anything we'd shared in years. The session ended with unprecedented engagement statistics. Viewership up 42%, comment volume doubled, subscription rate increased by 37%. Apparently, Maggie Midnight's mysterious husband was good for business. "You were wonderful," Margaret said afterward, as we dismantled the setup together, another new routine we'd established. "I felt ridiculous," I admitted, like a nervous teenager on camera for the first time. "That authenticity is what they responded to," she insisted. "No pretense, no performance. Just a real man navigating unfamiliar territory." There was something liberating about being seen that way. Not as the competent engineer, the reliable provider, the practical problem solver I'd been my entire adult life, but simply as a man willing to be vulnerable alongside his wife. As weeks turned into months, our arrangement evolved. I found myself moving from silent observer to occasional participant to production assistant. I learned about lighting, about camera angles, about the importance of authentic engagement. I helped Margaret refine her business model, applying my engineering project management skills to her content calendar and marketing strategy, and in private, away from the cameras and the audience, we began rebuilding our own intimacy, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with surprising intensity. The boundaries between Maggie and Margaret, between her online persona and our private relationship, remained clear but no longer divisive. They were simply different expressions of the same remarkable woman I was rediscovering. 6 months after my initial discovery, Margaret proposed something that would have been unthinkable half a year earlier, a couples channel. "Not to replace my solo content," she explained as we sat in our sunroom, planning the upcoming week's sessions, "but as a complimentary offering. There's real hunger out there for models of how couples navigate this stage of life together." "Models?" I laughed. "We're hardly relationship experts. We nearly imploded." "That's exactly why it could work," she insisted. "We're not presenting ourselves as having all the answers. We're showing what it looks like to rebuild after decades of comfortable neglect, to rediscover each other after taking each other for granted." I considered it, surprised that the idea didn't immediately repel me as it would have 6 months ago. What exactly would this entail? Conversations mostly, demonstrations of the techniques and approaches we've been exploring, honest reflections on the challenges and rewards of long-term partnership. "And the physical elements?" I asked cautiously. Margaret smiled, understanding my concern. "Only what you're comfortable with." We set the boundaries together. Nothing exploitative, nothing that feels wrong to either of us. I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago, rigid, judgmental, closed off to new experiences. That man would have laughed at the very suggestion of appearing on camera to discuss intimacy. But I wasn't entirely that man anymore. "Let me think about it," I said, not rejecting the idea outright. 2 weeks later, Silver Connections with Richard and Maggie premiered to Margaret's established audience. The format was simple, a weekly conversation between longtime partners about maintaining connection, rediscovering desire, and navigating the unique challenges of intimacy in later life. To my astonishment, I found myself enjoying it. There was something oddly freeing about discussing topics I'd spent a lifetime considering too private for conversation. About hearing from other couples struggling with similar issues. About being seen not just as a husband or provider, but as a man still capable of growth, still interested in connection, still invested in desire. The channel grew rapidly, attracting a different demographic than Margaret's solo content. More couples, more people interested in the emotional aspects of long-term partnership. We received messages from viewers in their 70s and 80s, thanking us for demonstrating that evolution and growth were possible at any stage. A year after finding Margaret's notebook, we celebrated a peculiar anniversary, not with recriminations about her deception or my obliviousness, but with recognition of how that discovery had ultimately transformed our marriage. If you hadn't found that notebook, Margaret mused as we shared a bottle of wine on our back porch, away from any cameras. Where do you think we'd be now? I considered the question seriously. Exactly where we were. Comfortable, content enough, slowly growing further apart without even realizing it. She nodded, swirling her wine thoughtfully. Living parallel lives under the same roof. Until one of us got sick or died, I added, the bluntness of aging making such statements less taboo. And then the other would wonder why it felt more like losing a roommate than a lover. Margaret reached across the space between our chairs, taking my hand in hers. I'm glad you found it, even with all the pain it caused initially. I'm glad you created it, I replied, surprising myself with the sincerity of the sentiment. Even, though I wish you'd found a way to bring me along earlier. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint our familiar neighborhood in extraordinary colors. There was a metaphor there, I thought, about how something viewed thousands of times can still reveal new beauty when seen with fresh attention. Later that night, in the privacy of our bedroom, no cameras, no audience, no performance, we made love with the combined wisdom of 42 years of history and 1 year of rediscovery. Margaret whispered things she'd once only shared with her online audience. I touched her with the reverent attention I'd once reserved for our earliest encounters. Afterward, holding each other in the darkness, Margaret asked, "Any regrets? About the channel? About going public with our journey?" I considered the question, carefully. I regret the years we wasted not really seeing each other. I regret that it took such a dramatic discovery to wake me up. I kissed her forehead gently. But I don't regret where we are now. Even when your golf buddies recognized you from the channel, she teased. That had been an awkward moment. Running into my regular foursome at the club after they'd stumbled across our content online. But even that had evolved into something unexpected. Honest conversations about marriage and intimacy among men who had previously limited their personal discussions to sports scores and investment tips. Even then, I assured her. Though I could have done without Frank asking for my autograph. She laughed, the sound still capable of warming me after all these years. We've created quite the unexpected third act, haven't we? We certainly have. I pulled her closer. Turns out life doesn't end at 60 after all. As if I haven't been saying that for years, she murmured sleepily. I know. I should have listened sooner. As Margaret drifted to sleep in my arms, I reflected on the strange journey of the past year, from betrayal to understanding, from hurt to healing, from comfortable numbness to uncomfortable growth. At 64, I had learned more about myself, my wife, and the nature of enduring partnership than in the previous 4 decades combined. It wasn't the retirement I had envisioned, calm, predictable, gradually fading into the background of life. Instead, it was vibrant, challenging, and surprisingly public. But then the best journeys rarely follow the expected path. Sometimes you have to get thoroughly lost before finding your way to someplace new and beautiful. Sometimes the most profound connection comes after the most painful disconnection. And sometimes, just sometimes, your wife's secret life as an online sensation for the senior set turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to your marriage. Life, as Margaret often reminded her, our audience, doesn't end at 60. Sometimes that's precisely when it gets interesting.